So I got a phone call on a Thursday night in June in 2015. An all too familiar voice screaming at me down the phone. One that had screamed at me down the phone and in person a lot of times throughout my life. And she said one thing to me. Well, no, she said a lot of things, but the one thing I remember was, James, you are homeless. That's what she said. And it was true. I was homeless. And not only was I homeless, as I slouched over at the desk in the office I worked and lived at, in a warehouse in Sydney, but I was watching the dream that my brother and I were trying to build metaphorically burn to the ground around me. You see, a year or probably only 15 months before that, we'd purchased this e-commerce business. It was a bike shop and it had a retail store. We moved from the Central Coast to Sydney and we'd literally made every mistake in the book. We had low margins, we had no competitive advantage, we had competitors overseas slaughtering us, and the most stupidest part of all of it is that I do now and I did then, I hate cyclists. So as funny as that is, it's actually the truth. Like, I didn't like them then, and trust me, I don't like them now. And funnily enough, with that attitude, the business was going downhill at a rate of knots that I couldn't control. And I knew one of two things was going to happen. Either the whole thing was going to nip up in a bud real quick, or I literally was going to die. Because this was so stressful. We were in probably a couple of $100,000 of debt. I was 22. My resting heart rate was like 100 beats a minute. Like, you imagine going to bed at night and you lay down, and apart from the fact you can't sleep, you're just sweating like you're about to go on stage and speak in front of 5,000 people. And no matter what you did, you meditated, no matter who I spoke to, I just couldn't calm down. Just the thought of it gives me chills. So I'm sitting there in my office, or my house, on this Thursday night. I can still see myself sitting there today. The dude just was totally broken. But the crazy thing is, only 30 months later, everything totally changed. And actually, on that note, Steve, I don't have a clicker. Here it is. Everything totally changed. This thing turned on. Oh, sure. So this is where I lived. It's a photo my brother took. We laughed about it at the time. We laugh about it even more now, but it wasn't fun. And this is in a warehouse we had in Leichhardt in Sydney. And that was our reality. I'm not sure. But the good news is, like I said, 30 months later, everything changed. And it changed largely in part because I made the biggest discovery of my marketing career that I've had to date. And that's what I call the copy slide principle. And I'm going to share it with all of you guys today. Because while this business was going really, really badly, and whilst this was an incredibly painful part of my life, my brother and I started a second business, as you do when your one business is going terribly. And we were importing vinyl dance floor from China, of all things, and we were making a killing selling it in Australia. One business was going up, the other one was going down. And once we eventually got out of the first business, I started consulting on marketing and helping other businesses with what I'd learned from this successful venture that we'd had. And as I said, 30 months later, things drastically changed. In the last 2.5 years, I've lived in Canada, the US, Colombia, Mexico. I haven't lived in Mexico, but I've traveled to Europe. I've been to Thailand. That's in Laguna Beach in California. I was in a nightclub in Vegas and I met this group of 30 Mexican chicks, and one invited me to come and live in some dangerous part of Mexico. So I said, oh, sure, that sounds like a good idea. Mum loved that one, but that was a photo I took from this lookout we were at. That's in Zurich in Switzerland. Switzerland's the most amazing place in the world. I got to go to Berlin. That's my sister. She's an international runway model, or she was, until I went to Berlin and found out she was a big drug addict, but that's another story. I love the NFL, so I went to an NFL game last year in LA. That was insane. And in June, I was at the top of the Empire State Building to go to a wedding of a chick I had never met, and no, I wasn't the groom. But guys, I don't tell you this to brag about my life, even though it is. I'm very grateful to be in the position I'm in, and I travel and I speak and I talk about marketing, and I genuinely get to do things that I love, like come down here and speak to you guys. But I want to talk about today about why the marketing things I've discovered from all the people I've worked with, all the successful campaigns I've worked on, that you guys can implement. Because I believe that every great marketing campaign only needs 3 things to be successful. And I'm going to share all of that with you today. But the main reason I wanted to share my story with you is twofold. Firstly, one of the 3 things you need for any great marketing campaign is to tell your story. And I'll get to that. I believe there's nothing more powerful in this world than for all of us to share our story. Sarah touched yesterday on the importance of video and content and putting yourself out there. And I'm going to talk about that more in my next session, but I can tell you one thing for certain. Anyone who doesn't do video, the only reason they don't do video is because they're scared of putting themselves out there. I've heard so many excuses over the years. I'm not sure about my content, perfectionism, this, that, the other. It's all valid, but it's all a reason to not do it based on fear. And I'm going to show you a video that I created later today that was a silly idea, but a fairly radical demonstration of overcoming fear. So there's that. Story's very important, and I think it builds trust and connection and empathy with people, with your prospects, with your customers, in a way that nothing else can. But the second reason I wanted to share that, this week I was featured on a podcast, and I had a really, really epic chat with the guy that interviewed me. And he said to me, James, what do you think the number one thing people need? What's the number one thing business owners need to be successful, or people that want to start a business need to be successful, or that business owners who want to take their business to the next level need? And I said, oh, that's easy. And I know Steve will agree with me on this one. It's not hard work. It's not work ethic. It's not any of that stuff, even though it's all important and super relevant. It's a healthy degree of self-delusion. Who here would still be running a business or would have started running a business if they knew what they were really signing up for? You probably say you wouldn't, but you all sickly love the pain. I know I do. And it's the truth, right? And what I mean is, like, when I bought this business, me and my brother invested cash, borrowed heaps of money. I was so young and dumb and naive, and in a lot of ways I still am. But I was just so delusional about how good I thought I was. I was like, oh yeah, the guys running the business now wouldn't know how to monetize it, but I read this blog once on Google. I can do this, I can figure this out. Oh yeah, we can crank up the organic traffic, we can get the marketing to work, we can convert more sales, and my brother was just as dumb. And that was essentially what we did. But the reality is, right, the guys that I went to uni with, my mates I'm still friends with now, they all were like, dude, this is such a bad idea, because I dropped out of a uni degree to start running this business. They were like, oh, this is terrible. These are all the reasons why it won't work. And I was just delusional about it. I was like, nah, we sweet. And the reality is that they were right. But 5 years later, I've traveled the world, I get to do all these amazing things, and they just have corporate jobs working at uni, right? Now again, everyone has their values. That's not to shit on them in any way, shape or form. But it's just the reality that we all need a healthy sense of self-delusion if we're going to be successful. And secondly, the podcast interviewer said to me, what do you think the biggest mistake people make, or business owners make, or entrepreneurs make? And I think it's this. I think that, and it goes for me as well, none of us are willing to go all in, like truly all in, and give something everything we've got. And I think that's the real shame, and I'll explain why. As Steve said, I was living in Colombia up until I was actually still meant to be there now, but that's another story. And I came back early, just a couple of weeks after I met Steve. And it was a really eye-opening experience. I basically went there because I was working with a guy on a project who had this like 2-story penthouse with a jacuzzi on the roof. He's like, you want to come live here and pay $1,000 a month, $1,000 rent a month? We've got a chef. I was like, oh, that's a pretty irresistible offer. You've converted me. But I went there and it was insane, right? Like the whole population speaks Spanish, very little English. I don't speak any Spanish. I had a Spanish tutor. I was learning it. And we lived in obviously a wealthy part of the tourist area in Medellin in Colombia. And we go outside of the tourist area, and when you get outside, it's just desolate poverty, right? And I was downtown one day, which is a really dangerous place to be if you're white. Like if you're, you don't go there like after 4 o'clock at night because they'll just rob you. And it was a really eye-opening experience. I'm walking down the street downtown in the middle of the day one day, and I see this Colombian guy, and we just lock eyes. And it was like I had this kind of like light bulb moment. We just stared at each other for a couple of seconds and then passed on. Nothing happened. But in that moment, I realized something. The only difference between me and that guy is I won the lottery. I'm white, I'm from a wealthy country, and compared to the rest of the world, a wealthy family. If you're in this room right now, you are extremely wealthy. And the only problem this guy has is he lost. He's got dark skin, he's got a Colombian stamp on his passport, which probably doesn't even have a passport because he's so poor he can't get out of the country. But if he tried to, I know because I've got Colombian friends, they don't want you in the US, they don't want you out here. It's going to be difficult for him to travel, difficult for him to get a job or a visa anywhere he goes. Yet because I'm white and I'm from a wealthy country, everyone will take me on, anyone will employ me. You know, I can travel anywhere, get a visa anywhere, obviously within reason. And I had this epiphany, kind of made me think back to the whole bike shop days of everything we'd done, that you really can't lose from here. The worst case scenario for a lot of us, if you really think about it, is really not that bad, you know. And I know a lot of you people in this room are older than me. When I typically go and speak and I say these things, people confront me with the whole, yeah, of course it's easy for you, man. You don't have kids, you don't have a partner, you know, you don't have a lot of financial liability. And I agree, I don't. And it is easier for me because of that. However, if you do have kids, if you do have a partner, a family, you've got two choices. Those things are either your reason for being successful or your excuse for why you won't be. Now, I didn't come here today to lecture you on that sort of thing, but I had this deep realization when I was in Colombia that we're already rich and we're all going out of here in the same box anyway. So we may as well line up and swing the bat, if you know what I'm saying. On that note, guys, let's move on to some lighter topics. You're probably wondering who the hell's this dude ranting at me. My name's James. Like I said, I'm a copywriter and a marketer. In the last 3 years, I've spent at least $500,000 on Facebook primarily, testing things in like 12 different industries. I've done direct mail campaigns. I've worked on some really big campaigns. I've created funnels that have generated 6 figures a month in revenue. And I'm genuinely blessed and honoured to get to do what I do. I'm very lucky in that sense. Here's some of the people I've worked with. These are some terrible images, but I've had some of my content published on the ClickFunnels blog, which is a huge marketing software company for those of you that may not have heard of them before. I've worked with Ty Lopez. I'm sure some of you have heard of him, big social media guy. I spoke at an event in Dallas in June for one of my clients. A guy with an Australian accent in a room with 500 women. It was horrible. I actually made a joke about it. I'm like, oh, there's 3 things I love about America. I don't even know what the first 2 were, the weather, the food, and how the women react to my accent. And the room went nuts. And I was like, Jesus, I knew it would be good. I didn't think it'd be that good. And then on top of these kind of things, I've actually created some awards that I've nominated myself for that I won, like this one, Australia's Best Looking Marketer. And there's 2 reasons why I'm showing you this one, guys. The first one is, well, it's obviously true. And the second one is that all great marketing is polarizing. It doesn't leave anyone feeling lukewarm or on the fence. If you look at marketing that doesn't work, it's generally because it doesn't evoke an emotional reaction in anyone. I post this kind of stuff on Facebook just for a laugh, like for my own sick, twisted sense of humor. But everyone feels a certain way about it, you know? Like, there'll be people in the room right now who don't know me thinking, mate, you're a wanker, right? And then there'll be people thinking that's funny. Then there'll be people thinking that's true, which is probably all of you. but like on a serious note, there'll be people thinking, everyone's thinking something. Everyone has an opinion on that, you know? And the best example I can give you of that is Donald Trump. And is my favourite example, especially at the events I've spoken at in the States. I just love to bring it up because every time you bring it up, the whole room's like, oh, what's he going to say? He's a foreigner. He's a foreigner. What's he going to say? And but it's a great example, right? No one feels lukewarm about him. No one doesn't know who he is. I'm not saying I agree with a lot of the things he says. I don't really follow him from a political standpoint. But if you purely look at him as someone that exercises communication as a tool, you feel a certain way about everything he says. And if you like him, you find a way to love everything he says. And if you don't, you find a way to hate him. But there's just no middle ground. And so he's a great example. And even if you look at the comments here, top comment here, you are hilarious. Bottom comment, he needs to curb the offensive language. You'll understand why that comment's on there later on. Very handsome. If my daughter sees, sure, she'd have a crush on you. I don't even know who that is. But the point is, all of these responses are varying and different because everyone feels a certain way about it. And that's like something I'm going to convey over the next 2 sessions. All right. We've got through the little life sermon I've given you all and some of my terrible jokes, so let's move on to what we're actually here for. I want to talk to you about what I've discovered from creating a lot of marketing campaigns. The 3 things that pretty much every great marketing campaign has, and how you can make it work in your business. So today I'm going to show you some case studies of how a Melbourne business coach used this to generate 75 grand in a single week in sales. I'm going to talk about what I call the copy slide principle. It's the secret process I've discovered that anyone can use to generate 100K a month and scale beyond that. And I've done it for clients, and I'm going to show you some case studies of that. So this is essentially everything I've done in the last 4 years. It's my whole body of work. So, just out of curiosity, who here runs Facebook ads? Who here writes their own ads by show of hands? Cool. All right, cool. Everyone's got some sort of experience with it. Awesome. All right. I want to talk about marketplace sophistication before I go any further. Does everyone know what I'm talking about when I say marketplace sophistication by show of hands? Awesome. Cool. You had to learn something. So, this is a really overlooked part of marketing. It's this idea that every single market, no matter what industry you're in, has a differing level of sophistication. And based on how sophisticated it is, indicates what sort of marketing message you need to resonate with prospects in that market. Now, by sophistication, what I mean is markets that are hyper-competitive have a high level of sophistication because businesses and entrepreneurs and marketers have served a lot of ads to that market. They've made a lot of claims and everyone's worn out by it. So a good example is like the weight loss market, right? Everyone's seen everything from lose fat to lose 5 kilos in 10 days to take this fat burning pill to, whatever the crazy things they're coming up with now, stuff that doesn't even work because the market has seen so many claims that to just go out with a message like, hey, lose 5 kilos in 10 days, doesn't really resonate with anyone. It's not a new idea that compels someone to engage in your marketing. So it's a very sophisticated market. On the other hand, if you look at, and probably 5 years ago this would have been a better example, but if you look at ride sharing, right, like Uber, when they came out, they were like, hey, we're ride sharing. And their marketing was literally like, explaining what they did, just like, also imagine being like a Phrygian, just being like, we install air conditioning, and everyone was like, whoa, that's like a stage 1 market when Uber came out. It's like they had to educate everyone on what the concept was. But now you've got and not so much out here, but in the States, there's like 4 or 5 competitors, and some compete on price, and some compete on like time variances to come and pick you up. They've had to change their claims because the market's got more sophisticated. So there's 5 stages, actually, of marketplace sophistication, but you only really need to worry about 3 of them, and the 3rd one is the most important for everyone in this room. So the first stage is what I call like the hello market. It's so new to the market that everybody is just like you're just telling people what it is, and Uber's a good example of that. Even like the iPhone, when it came out, was very like, no one was using the word smartphone because it was kind of the first of its type in that sense. So it's when you have a brand new product or, you enter like a blue ocean. Everyone familiar with like a blue ocean versus a red ocean? You know what that is? Yeah. So when you go into a blue ocean, no one's been in this market before, your marketing claim will be very basic. It'll just be like, hey, lose weight, or, find your dream partner, whatever it is, get your tax return done. But everyone's heard that after a while, so your claims need to get more sophisticated. In the second stage of marketplace sophistication, it's like what we call the what market. So instead of being like lose weight, it's now got to be like lose 5 kilos in 30 days. It gets specific. The claim gets more specific. If you're a business coach, it goes from, make money online to make 100 grand in 90 days. If you're a financial planner, it goes from, have more money in retirement to save a certain amount in a certain time frame, or buy a certain number of properties for a certain price, or whatever it is. But then when we get to the third stage, this is where most people are at. The market evolves because all these people go from the first stage of making a claim to the second stage of making an expanded claim. And in that second stage market, it goes from, lose 5 kilos in 30 days to lose 10 kilos in 20 days. Everyone's trying to it's like a one-upmanship. Everyone's trying to come out with a better claim, a better way of getting you the result faster or in less time, or to make you more money, right? And then after a while, that kind of muddies up the market and no one can cut through. So you've got to go to stage 3, and this is where most markets are at that you guys are in. And in this stage, it becomes less about the claim you make and more about the mechanism that achieves the outcome. So instead of being lose 5 kilos in 30 days, it's, the fat blaster method, how to lose 5 kilos in 30 days. Or it's like this fat loss pill is the thing you need to lose 5 kilos in 30 days. So it becomes about the mechanism or the process or the formula. That becomes the key distinguishing factor in a stage 3 market that you need to address for people to understand why you do what you do and why they should work with you. And I'm going to talk more about the mechanism in a second, but the whole idea of having this mechanism, like you guys would have seen ads like, some ancient, I've seen this thing online that's like, there's a type of iced tea or red tea that comes from West Africa that helps with weight loss or something. And if you can make people believe that the only way they can get the result is to use your mechanism, then they have no choice but to give you money. See, the good thing about this is that when someone's bought into your mechanism or your idea of what they need to be successful, they have to work with you. If you can make me believe that the only way for me to lose weight is your specific method, because I've tried everything else and it doesn't work, then I have to give you money. And that's why you see like keto and vegan and paleo and all these different types of diets as an example. But it's the same in any market, If you're a financial planner and you can convince me that the only way for me to become a millionaire by the time I get to 30 or 40 is for me to follow this specific investing method where I acquire some property and then some shares and then some mutual funds or whatever, if that's the only way for me to do it, then I have to work with you. And that's the key part of having a mechanism that's compelling to your market. Does that make sense, guys? I just covered like something that took me 2 years to learn in about 5 minutes. Yeah, cool. And the thing I'm going to touch on shortly, and why I'm so passionate about story, is because, what's your name, sorry, on the end there? Michael. Me and Michael could sell the exact same product, right? Exactly the same thing. But if we both tell our stories, you can tell by looking at us, we haven't lived the same life, And so if we both tell our stories and how our stories helped us develop our own mechanism, even if we're promising the same outcome, we're not really competing anymore. Because some people will resonate with me because I'm younger and I've done different things, and some will resonate with Michael. And that's the beauty of making this work in your business. So guys, what marketing problems do you guys face? Just shout some out for me. Yep. Getting them to buy into like what it is that you're the solution for them. Yep, awesome. Anyone else? Yep, so lead gen, a quality problem with leads. Yep. Sorry? Yes. What market are you in? Yes. Makes sense. What's your... Okay, like tutoring? Okay. Yep, cool. Gotcha. Awesome. I've boiled down marketing problems to 4 things, which is some of what these guys touched on here. These are typically the problems you'll face. You can't stand out because you haven't differentiated yourself through either your story or your mechanism. There's no difference between you and your competitors because you haven't demonstrated that you have a mechanism that makes you unique, or you don't have a unique selling proposition. you can't generate leads, or you just can't generate the quality leads that you want, typically problems. There's obviously more than that, but these are like the main ones that I see, and variations of that, obviously. Is there any other ones anyone can think of? And I can chuck my slides up in the group too, guys, if you want to check them out. So, I want to talk about the single greatest marketing discovery I've had, which I've kind of alluded to so far. It's what I call the copy slide principle. Nothing like chucking a little trademark logo above it to make it look legit. It's not trademarked, I just did that. It makes it look more official. So, before I do that, I've got to tell two stories. My best mate, Ricky, he's this insane marketer, and we work together on a bunch of projects because my main skill set is writing copy and writing ads. And he was working with this guy named Josh Shipp, and you can look him up. He's a motivational speaker. He speaks to parents of like troubled teens and like how to be a better parent. He's from a foster home, pretty crazy story. Anyway, this was like mid-2016, and we were just like, we'd been marketing for a while, me and Ricky, and we were chatting about new ideas and new ways of generating leads and improving the funnels we were working on. And we hypothesized this idea that if you wrote really long stories in the middle of the Facebook feed, which seemed really counterintuitive, you would be able to kind of hijack the algorithm and like pre-frame someone. Like if someone read a 1,000-word story about you before they clicked on your landing page or went to one of your offers, they're going to be way more bought into who you are and what you do. That was kind of this idea we had. So he starts working with this guy, and this guy had a phenomenal story, and he said to me, he's like, do you want to write a story and we'll test it out? I was like, yeah, sweet. So I don't think I even chatted to the guy. I think I just watched some of his YouTube videos, watched a thing he did, learnt about him, and I wrote this story, and the ad went like bananas. I actually don't have a screenshot of it, but it's got like 4,000 likes. It went crazy. Everyone was watching it, and he did really well. And me and Ricky were like, far out, there's something to be said for this story stuff. So I've started since then, and I still do now. I write a lot of Facebook ads that are long stories, like 1,000 words, and talk about trials and tribulations. And I've developed this like 8-step process for doing it, which I'm going to talk about in the next session. That's part of this, but it's not the only way to do it. And through testing these long stories, I was like, far out, there's something in story. You know what I mean? Because you would see people would comment on these ads and they'd be like, man, I relate to you. Like, I went through the same struggle, or my kids went through the same thing. And I started to see how much people related to each other's stories. And one thing that I think is really important, like who here has ever followed someone on social media that you think like, man, this guy's just got the life, or woman has got the life. They've got the dream partner, the house, the cars, they're traveling. But then you see, and you never see like the vulnerability. You never see the downside or what they're going through to get that, or what they went through to get it. And you think they have this life with no problems that you wish you could have. But then when you realize that they are super vulnerable, if they post something super vulnerable, when they tell you about some of their challenges, you're like, far out, they're like, you like them more because now they're just like you. So this is the power of storytelling, right? A really good example I can think of for someone I look up to is like Conor McGregor, the UFC fighter. When he got beaten by Nate Diaz, he just come out and was like, hey, you know what? Yeah, I got beaten. I talked a lot of trash before the fight, but dude beat me. There's no excuses for it. And everyone was like, wow, like we like you more now because you just owned it. And so that's a really powerful thing that I talk a lot about. And then earlier this year, when this whole thing kind of came to fruition, it's actually crazy because in the next session, I'm going to talk more about the business that me and my brother started that got us out of the hole we were in. And I created this principle like this year, but I wrote the marketing for this other business 3 years ago. And someone went back to this marketing I'd created, because it's still online, I'm going to show you guys. Someone was like, man, I see how you used this exact thing you created when you launched that business. And I was like, far out. I went back and looked at it. I'm like, I didn't even realize I was doing it. I was using these 3 things, which is crazy. But I was consulting to this guy earlier this year, and he was a business consultant for people that grow Shopify stores. And he was like, look, I can help anyone who has a Shopify store with a proven product scale to $1,000 a day in revenue. I was like, awesome. How do you do it? And he was like, well, I've got this 6-step process I take people through. And he starts explaining me to it. I was like, oh, awesome. Like, tell me more about how you learned to do all that stuff. And he's like, oh, it's a funny story, James. My wife got this disease. He did tell me what it was. I can't remember. But this really bad disease, and she was about to die. And he goes, I left my office job and I ran to the hospital, and she was like literally on her deathbed. And in that moment, I realized that I'm not going to spend the rest of my life working for like some corporate warrior or whatever, when I can go and do my own thing. And from that, I really got into e-commerce and learned all this stuff about online business and developed this method. And it was in that moment that it all clicked. Because these are the 3 things you need to be successful with any marketing campaign. It's what I call the copy slide principle. The 3 things: you need to get crystal clear on your promise, right? Every single business on this planet has a promise, an outcome, a result that it delivers. And every single marketing campaign has the same thing. Sometimes you can have marketing campaigns that have promises different to the overall promise of the company because you could be selling different products or whatever, but every single campaign will have a promise. It's the thing that connects a cold prospect, someone who has no idea who you are, to your end customer. And once you get clear on that promise, because most people are really, like, marketing that doesn't work doesn't have a clear promise. That's the first thing you need to get clear on. But then once you get clear on that promise, you need a mechanism to deliver it, like I talked about before, that is different to everyone else out there who is offering a promise. So if everyone in this room is marketing the same product, but everyone has a different mechanism, they can find a way to differentiate themselves. But once you've done that, in most cases, especially if you sell information or consulting or coaching or any online business like that, you realize that if I say, oh, hey guys, I've shown you a way to grow a business using my ABC method, the problem is if I just talk about the method, it just sounds like something I made up. There's no credibility for it. There's no context to it. There's no reason why you would believe me. And that's why you need to tell your story. And when your story goes through these trials and tribulations and ups and downs and wins and losses and things like that you've had, you kind of realize, like, hey, you can say to someone, hey, after going through all of this stuff, I developed this method, or I discovered this method. I've realized there was a better way of doing it. Kind of like I'm telling you guys now with this process. Exactly what I'm taking you through is my mechanism. And I told you my story. And then you're like, yeah, from going through these things, like this weight loss journey I went on, or this journey of growing a business, or this da-da-da, whatever, I realized that the best way to do it is this thing I've called the copy slide principle, this thing I've called the ABC method. And you have that mechanism, but the story is what provides credibility to the mechanism, and the mechanism is what delivers the promise.